Last time we were speaking about freight rates. We were talking about trucking rates. That was the week before. We looked at the modal presentations by the group before I went to New Orleans. And one thing that we didn't get to was talking about air freight calculations. For the other two major modes that we're concerned about as far as rail and water, those are typically done by carload shipments or amount of tons in barges, things like that. So we're not as concerned with those two modes, and pipeline, frankly, uh, that's just based on the volume that's being moved. So we want to spend a little time, though, talking about how you calculate air freight rates in order to make sure that we understand how that works in both the, because it interfaces with the LTL trucking environment. So the concept of chargeable weight is what's important in looking at air rates. And chargeable weight is either actual weight or volumetric weight. Volumetric weight is the really fancy term that people use. Most people refer to it as dimensional weight, and they will generally shorten that if they work in the industry to say dim, either dim weight or the packages, the shipment dims out. Whenever you hear that, it means that it's going by dimensional weight. Whichever yields the higher amount is the one that's used to determine the cost. This is typically communicated between freight consolidators and international freight forwarders or in-house staff and the airlines. So typically, as a shipper, you may not be that very familiar with it. You may not run across it. But if you have to ship something, it's very useful to know how this is figured out. So when we talk about weight or measure, there's a couple different steps we need to follow. The first one is to determine the actual weight in pounds or kilograms. In the United States environment, we're typically going to be using pounds. Once you get involved in international, it's usually going to be in kilos. For step number two, you find the measure factor using these conversion factors. So depending whichever one is applicable is the one that you would apply to the situation. So 166 cubic inches is equal to a pound or a volume pound. So example here, 12 inches by 20 inches by 8 inches will give us 1,920 cubic inches. So if we divide the 1,920 cubic inches by 166, we get 11.57 dimensional pounds. And the industry does not use fractional amounts. You're always going to round up to the next whole number. So in this case, it would be 12 pounds. So if your product weighed 10 pounds, but the dimensional weight was 12, it would ship as 12 pounds. It can also use a factor of 366 cubic inches per kilogram. So again, if we take our 1,920 cubic inches divided by 366, we're going to get 5.25 dimensional kilos, which rounds up to 6 kilos. And if you think about a kilo is approximately 2.4 or 2.2045 pounds, multiply that, you're going to come out roughly to what we came out with above. There's a little bit of rounding difference. If you have everything in kilos, you use 6,000 cubic centimeters as the measure for the conversion. So for example, if we have something that's 50 centimeters by 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters, it's going to equal 80,000 cubic centimeters. And that divided by 6,000 is 13.33 dimensional kilos, which will round up to 14 kilos. Now, if you look down at the footnote in the bottom, 6,000 is the International Air Transportation Association, which you'll frequently see them referred to as IATA, their acronym IATA. This is their standard. But depending on where you go around the globe, you may find other numbers used, with the most typical being 7,000. But you may also see 5,000, so you just have to find out what is the rate that is typically used in a given country. And you're going to run into this in the international freight environment. The fourth bullet point that we can go back and look at is that there's 61,024 cubic inches in 1 cubic meter. CBM is the cubic meter designation. So cubic meter times 167 is a conversion factor that will give you the volumetric weight. So for example, we have 40 inches by 38 inches by 41 will give us 62,320 cubic inches. We divide that by the factor of 61,024, which will give us 1.02 cubic meters. We then multiply the 1.02 cubic meters by the 167, and we're going to find that we have 170.34 dimensional kilos, rounded up to 171 kilos. Then in step 3, we choose the higher factor, either the actual weight or dimensional weight. Step 4, you use the appropriate factor and calculate the shipping cost. So simply, you have to figure out what is the applicable conversion factor to use given the information that you have, and then work it out. So skipping down to where it says example, let's say that we have 2 boxes that we're shipping. Each weighs 215 pounds and measures 36 inches by 42 inches by 18 inches. So our gross weight is 430 pounds. And if we convert this to kilos, 430 excuse me, pounds times the conversion factor of 0.4536 is going to give us 195 kilos. The measure is 27,216 cubic inches times 2 boxes, so for a total of 54,432 cubic inches. And when we convert that to a dimensional pound by using our 166, we're going to have 327.90 pounds, or 328 pounds. If we are going to convert that to kilos, though, because we got to measure kilos to kilos, pounds to pounds, if we convert that 54,432 cubic inches and divide that by our 366 conversion factor, we're going to end up at 148.72 kilos, or 149 kilograms. You could also convert it the other way if you wanted to, and notice that it comes out to be the same. So in this case, we're going to use actual weight because it's 195 kilos and it's going to yield the airlines more money. So whichever one is important, or the higher rate, will be the one that's used. So in the air freight industry, we're going to have a weight or measure, and the common charges that you're going to run into are base air freight charges, and they will be quoted X amount of money per kilo or per pound. You will frequently see terminal handling charges, which is referred to by the acronym THC. You may see transfer charges, and that's typically in airlines when you have to transfer it from one airline to another in order for the onward flight. And you may see additional insurance. So let's say in our example where we've got the 195 kilos, that we were quoted an air freight charge of $6.75 per kilo and a flat terminal handling charge of $40. Therefore, the calculations would be the $6.75 times the 195 kilos to give us $1,316.25. And the terminal handling charge, flat $40, be added onto that, and the total to ship those 2 items would be $1,356.26. So when we look at these, we want to practice this. So there's going to be a couple practice problems with an answer guide. I'm going to add more problems in the near future so that you can get some practice doing this, and then we'll, in one of our face-to-face online classes, if we can call it that, face-to-face, we'll then talk about and see if you have any questions about this.